All right, this is the Sherborn ZBA. It's January 16th, 2024, 7 p.m. This is a continued 40B hearing on two projects, one on Greenwood Street, one on Farm Road. I think we also have the always popular and delightful Select Board with us tonight. Do you wish to call your board to order, Mr. Chairman?
That's a tall task. But right now I'm the only one, it looks like. So I may have to interrupt you if we have
Marion's joining now, Jeff.
Okay, well, whenever you get to a quorum and want to, Jeff, just raise your hand. We'll figure it out.
I'll do that. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, I see the development team is here. Good evening, Mr. Murchison, Mr. Haverty, and all the, as they say in the movies, usual suspects. Okay, we've got an awful lot of ground to cover tonight. I think we're going to try to start with Greenwood Street. Bob, if you can give us your view of where you stand on your plans with the Board of Health, and I'm going to ask the Board of Health to tell me where we think we are. I believe on Greenwood Street, we're mostly down to approval of the final Title V plans.
Sure. Yeah. So thank you, Rick. 2 weeks ago tomorrow night, the Board of Health took up our Title V application and discussed it at length. After they voted approval of the Title V application, they discussed at length, I think, things that they want to discuss with you tonight, which I encourage them to do. The Title V, as I said, on all 4 lots has been approved. I've requested a PDF and or a hard copy, but have not been able to get that from them yet, but I'm sure it's forthcoming. So I think we are all set as far as our Title V approval goes. And anything else you can think of that I should report on?
I don't think so. There were a series of questions that came in from Mr. Weslowski that I'll try to deal with on a very summary basis. Is there anyone here from the Board of Health to speak on the Board of Health plans for Greenwood Street? And for people who haven't been to these hearings before, Greenwood Street is a much smaller project. 4 lots, 4 single-family homes. The material deviation from Sherborn standard zoning is that the lot sizes are a little bit too small, but it is technically a 40B and under all the 40B regulations. Anybody from the Board of Health?
Mark Orm's joining now.
Okay, all right. Well, while we're doing that,
Julie is here also.
Okay, okay. Julie, go ahead. If you've got something to say, or maybe we're just saying that you're here.
Saying that I'm here, and I'm not
Okay.
sure. I think I see one other member of the board here, but I don't think we have a quorum. But I know people are rolling in.
Okay.
But yes, Bob did characterize that correct. We did approve the the Title V plans with 2 conditions. One is that the exact lot. Should we go through that now, Rick?
Sure. If you're willing to report for your board, that's
Sure.
awesome. It doesn't have to be in a public meeting for your board, so please go ahead.
Sure. So 2 conditions. The exact lot lines set during the A&R process are not changed as shown on the final septic plans, and if so, the board reserves the right to review the plans to ensure compliance with Title V. And the second condition is very similar. If the wetland delineation changes upon Conservation Commission review or additional conditions are imposed by the commission, the board reserves the right to require new plans for review for Title V compliance.
Okay.
And Rick, just let me add that we do have a ANRAD filed on the deed from the Conservation Commission. So our wetlands are in fact locked down for 3 years from the date, maybe a year ago. So the wetlands are not going to change. They've been legally delineated and recorded.
All right, let me try to recharacterize your answer and see if you're still willing to go along with it. Which is, it sounds like you're not worried about those 2 conditions because you think your lot lines are locked down. They're not going to change either for real estate conveyancing purposes or for wetlands purposes.
No, of course, Rick, as you know, the meets and bounds have not been drawn up. They're being worked on right now, but the lines are as proposed.
The physical locations of the lines won't move.
That's correct.
They're in any material respect, there might
that's
be a
correct.
hundredth of an inch.
That's
Okay. All right, so it sounds like, if I'm hearing you correctly, you're comfortable with the conditions they imposed.
Correct, yes.
Okay. Hang on for just a second. Mr. Waldron.
Just sorry to interrupt. We do have a quorum now, so I'll open the select board meeting in conjunction with the ZBA meeting. And I'd like to have a motion in a second.
I
We have
move to open the meeting.
And Stephen Tsai, I believe, is also here.
Second.
Okay, and all in favor, Marion,
Aye.
Stephen,
Aye.
and I am I as well. Thanks. Sorry to interrupt.
No problem. And just so I understand, select board members, you're mostly here to observe and comment, and just, you needed to have be in a meeting format so you could physically be, so you could metaphorically all be in the same place without
Yes,
violating
and
the open meeting
we
law.
just felt for the open meeting law, it's just better to be on the conservative side. So we
Excellent.
post for the meeting.
Okay, sure, super. All right, that sounds great. All right, back to substance. Daryl Beardsley.
Yes, we also posted this meeting and we do have a quorum of Board of Health members. So I'd like to call the Board of Health meeting to order, if that's okay with you.
Please, go ahead.
Okay, so it is 7:07 p.m. on January 16th, 2024. And I'm calling the Board of Health meeting to order. And since it's a virtual meeting, we will announce each member can announce their presence. So Daryl Beardsley present.
Julie Dreyfus present.
Diana Hook present.
And I haven't seen anyone else unless I'm missing that. So hopefully if we catch them when they join, if they join, then we can expand that.
Okay.
Thank you.
All right, so thank you, select board members, and thank you, Board of Health members. While we have you, Daryl,
Yes.
were you able to hear the back and forth between Bob and I about where they think the plans are, and did you agree with that characterization if you heard it?
I did not hear all of it. I heard the end of it, so I don't know what came first.
All right, let me take it again, and then Bob can listen carefully, and you can listen carefully, and you can both throw metaphorical rocks at me if you think I got it, if you think I get it wrong. The plans were submitted to the Board of Health. They were voted at a Board of Health meeting as approved. There were two conditions. One was that the plans show the exact lines. If the lines changed, the board reserved the rights to revisit whether or not there was compliance. And second, if the wetlands lines moved again because of subsequent to your approval activities by the Conservation Commission, again the board was reserving its rights to modify your approval if the wetlands lines moved.
Yes, or if there were any conditions by the board of, by the Conservation Commission that would somehow have some bearing on what we had approved.
All right, and is there text for those conditions? Are they written down anywhere?
As recorded from our meeting, and those minutes aren't done yet, which is
Okay.
what captures it, but we can put that into writing.
And the meeting was recorded, so we can reconstruct what you voted. Yes.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
All right. Okay. So in that case, and I'm looking at you now, Bob, it sounds like we're all sort of aligned on what happens with those plans at this point.
I think that's right. And I think as a practical matter, anything that you condition is not going to put us in violation of Title V. I can't imagine you conditioning something that would put us in violation of Title V. So I think
You never know, but our default setting would be to listen to our subject matter expert board, the Board of Health.
Yeah.
Okay. And Daryl, it sounds like there was also a question as to physical possession of the plans. Do you, in your ordinary course, keep physical possession of the plans at your board in your files under
We
Ellen's?
have multiple copies, and we do have one that we issue to the applicants once it's approved, but we've never done that until the conditional 2 items have been resolved. And then we release the plans at that
All
point.
right. All right. So what I'm going to propose is that those plans be released to them when we issue our decision. Which would be
Okay.
the equivalent of you issuing your decision because we're issuing for you. Bob, does that sound like a fair way to proceed?
I don't think it's problematic, Rick. I don't understand it from a legal perspective because they're two very distinct legal processes. And if Paul wants to weigh in, I don't think it's an issue, but it's odd to me to make a Title V permit release conditional on a comprehensive permit. As a practical matter, I could never use the Title V permit to build anything unless I get the comprehensive permit, obviously. So it's
So you're saying essentially you're not using your 40B powers at all with that permit and you'd like it just released to you under the Board of Health rules.
right.
No.
I only applied for a Title V permit. It was voted to be approved. This is really not important, I don't think, Rick, but.
Okay, right. Because I was going to say, if you applied for a Title V permit on an undersized lot, they'd probably say, sorry, we're not going to hear you because your lot's too small.
Well, as long as we're meeting Title V requirements, I would think not. But again, this is
Yeah,
this is
okay.
kind of not important.
I agree with you. This is not, the juice is not worth the squeeze, as some of my
Exactly.
colleagues say.
Correct. Paul, did you have
Um,
anything on that?
No, I mean, I agree. It's really just an academic question. Ultimately, you're not going to be able to proceed until you get the comprehensive permit, so it doesn't really matter one way or the other.
Exactly. Yep.
Okay. All right. And I had also under Greenwood, any other business, and under any other business, I'm going to try to very quickly, I can find it, respond to Mr. Weslowski's email, which came in late today, which was asking, he's at 34 Greenwood Street, Weslowski. Am I getting your name correctly, sir?
I'm not Stephen Wesolowski. I'm his wife, Meredith Wesolowski, but Wesolowski, I mean, it's close enough, yeah.
All right. Wesolowski. You're probably cousins with Novak somewhere back in the old country. The specific question was, what aspects of the proposed project do not meet Sherborn code? What waivers are currently proposed? What are examples of waivers? I mean, it's a very broad question, which by its terms sort of calls for a diving into the 40B statute and all the 40Bs we've done in the past in the town. And I'm not going to dive into that. I'm going to try to give you a thumbnail instead, which is the primary waiver that is being sought for Greenwood Street is lot size. The lot sizes are supposed to be 1 acre in that zone. And these are, Bob, keep me honest, they're like 9/10 of an acre or 8/10 of an acre, or they are under, but not, they're not, 1/8 of an acre or a tenth of an acre.
I believe it's 0.992, I think, Rick. I don't have it.
Whatever, but they're close but under, so that they need the 40B statute.
It's a 2 acre zone.
Yeah, okay, I'm sorry, thank you. So the whole point of the 40B statute is that for a qualifying 40B, the developer can apply for and should, absent good grounds otherwise, receive waivers of town bylaws like lot size. And without going into all the details, it appears to me, and the board hasn't voted yet, I haven't heard from my other board members, that the Greenwood project probably applies. And as to what waivers have been applied for and gotten in all the other projects in town, that is a long and deep rabbit hole. But if you look at the town website, Jeannie Guthrie does a fabulous job of putting things up, and you'll be able to see the waiver requests for all those other projects, which in the case of those other projects were much more complicated and needed much more difficult waivers. Development team, how do you feel about that summary?
Fair enough. Yeah.
I don't see Haverty making faces at me, so I must be doing okay. Okay.
There are a couple of hands up after that. So.
Okay.
And I guess I'm just, the nature of the questions that my husband submitted, I think, are just that, okay, so we're more than having the lot size required for that area. That area was previously investigated by developers and it did not make perk tests. You know, we just want to make sure that the town is well aware of this, which we know they are, and that we want to make sure that, you know, or at least have people think about, you know, is the waiver, like how basically how big of a waiver is okay in order to get these things forward, you know, because that's a pretty significant deviation from the norm, from our point of view.
Yes, well, there's sort of two questions buried in there. Let me try to unpack them and answer them. One is the waivers are not sort of omnibus. Here's what I want to build. Everything gets waived for me to build that. Sometimes developers ask for that, but that's not proper under the statute. They should say everything they want. If they need a 15-foot side yard variance and a 1 acre size in a 2 acre zone and a 40-foot height variance and they're supposed to list those out. And with respect to perk tests, I believe Daryl and other Board of Health members keep me honest that these lots in these configurations for these septic systems passed their perk tests.
Yes,
Okay,
and they were all observed by the health agent.
right. So you know, lots can flunk in the past and then pass later. That does happen, and it sounds like that happened here.
Yeah, and it also was, the perk tests were done, and I was told that this shouldn't impact it, but they were done at the height of the drought. So I just
right.
want to make sure that that was on record as well.
Can I address that, Rick? It turns out in this case, and it's not always the case, but in this case, the high groundwater, which is what you're, I assume, thinking about when you're talking about a drought, the high groundwater was determined by what's called models, which is lines in the soil when you dig down. And so it's really the determination of high groundwater when you use models is not impacted by drought or very wet conditions like we have now.
Yeah, because it's standing water over there right now.
Right, but
Yeah, I mean,
I think, Bob, the answer is technically were all of the rules for when and how a perk is done followed for these lots or not. And again, I'm looking at you, Daryl, but I think the answer to that is for these tests, the answer was yes, and they passed.
And I'd also defer to Mark if he has any other comment that he would like to make regarding that.
I could answer that. What they did is the first developer tested closer to the street. And then this developer decided to test further in from the street and found acceptable results.
Which in Mark and Daryl, correct me if I'm wrong, which you're allowed to do.
That is correct. It has happened before where engineers will go out and explore and find a different area, and that's what happened here.
Okay. And Daryl, you had your hand up, but it probably wasn't to field the questions I just asked you, so.
No, it was more to say that on the, we've been talking about what things on these plans vary from our regulations. So the idea is to also include that for you in what we'll be providing you when we're finalizing and wrapping up our comments on these projects.
Okay. Paul Haverty.
Yes, Mr. Chairman.
If I'm waiting to hear from my Board of Health on the exact conditions, sounds like I ought to leave my hearing open because that sounds like input from them that I shouldn't be taking after I've closed the hearing.
Well, you certainly shouldn't be taking input from any party after the hearing's been closed.
Right, right. Okay, thanks. You and I see it the same way. That's just relevant to the, do we try to close everything tonight?
Absolutely, yes.
Okay, Ms. Dreyfus, and then Michael, I'll get to you.
I just wanted to follow up with a question that came up at our recent Board of Health meeting. It looks like from the development team, I'm sorry, I will put my hand down. The development team said there will be a deed restriction for 4 bedrooms for each of the homes. And Title V allows up to 9 rooms for a 4-bedroom home. We have not seen the floor plans or the layout to see the number of rooms proposed for each home. And so our question was, will there be an additional deed recording for any additional rooms, such as a finished basement room?
Good
Well, that's
question.
exactly what the deed recording will be, is that the finished basement cannot be a bedroom. And that's allowable under Title V.
Let me try to answer that a little bit differently. I think the form of deed restriction we're going to use, Julie, is the one that we have used in other 40Bs in town, where we have allowed people to deed restrict their way around the septic flows. A good example would be the field at Sherborn or 59 North Main Street. I think under traditional analysis of counting bedrooms and rooms and saying this one's a bedroom and this one's not a bedroom under Title V, they're over, but they're allowed to restrict to 2 bedrooms for those, and we have a form of restriction that we've used, and that I'm going to propose to use here, Bob.
Thank you.
Michael Lesser.
Excuse me. Hi, Michael Lesser, 54 Forest Street, speaking here as part of the Energy and Sustainability Committee. The committee sent in on November 28th a list of suggested conditions. I don't know how you're going to proceed with that. I guess I'll just highlight a number of them that were related to maximizing water efficiency and conservation, given the fact that it's more dense development than is normally zoned here, and whether the ZBA would consider some of the few specific things there as to conditioning their water use, given the more dense development than is normally in place there. And so I don't know, you have a big agenda, but we articulated a number of suggested conditions there and how you want to deal with that.
Well, they're on the table. There are lots of asks for lots of people that are on the table for both of these projects. And the fact that we're not specifically ruling on any of them, yes or no, doesn't mean they're being ruled on yes or no. We're aware of those, and we'll evaluate them as part of our process, part of our deliberative process after we close the hearing.
Okay.
And I think the Murchison team also commented on some of those, like, well, we want to do this one, we don't want to do that one. A lot of them we're going to do just as a matter of practice. I think there was a response to those, wasn't there, Bob?
I may not have responded on Greenwood, but it would be the same response for Greenwood that I gave you on Farm Road, which is many of their ideas we're going to implement, but I don't believe that we should be conditioned with things that are not a matter of town regulation. In other words, and that we're not required at Abbey Road and not required at other market rate communities in town. To me, that's a philosophical issue. It's not, a lot of these ideas are good ideas. Michael and I talk regularly about them, and I'm in favor of them, and I implement them in my work. But I don't think I should be conditioned on things that are not required under town regulations and applied to market rate development.
Okay, so since even though we all know that you are behind both LLCs are technically separate legal entities, would you please send in a response to his letter on behalf of Greenwood, just so that we have it in our file, and as we're evaluating things, we'll be able to figure it out, because of course it's sort of intellectual corner cutting to mix and match and say they're all Murchison projects, but we can't do that.
I understand. No problem.
All right.
I guess I'll just say one little quick comment to that last point of that I would think even though they're not regulations for the town, that given the denser use and the water issues, that you might consider them anyway, separate from the regulatory constraint that Bob mentions, but I'll leave it to you then.
Okay, thank you. Todd Stessel.
Hi, yes. This is Megan Stossel. I have the flu, so I'm not turning my camera on. I think as a butters, the neighbors in general are just wondering about the process in terms of evaluating this project and not meeting the requirement. I'll say the wrong thing, but 0.92 acre lot, for instance, in a 2 acre zone, when there's only one affordable house. This isn't a large scale project. that's going to increase that density in our town. So is that being taken into consideration?
All right, good question, but extremely frustrating, which is, this is the way the statute works. And I don't like it. I don't support it. I didn't write the statute, but I took an oath to execute the laws as they are on the books, and it is on the books that way. And yes, so you get 3 market rate houses and only one affordable one. And it's in terms of trying to get to a high number of affordable houses, it's chasing your tail. It doesn't work. I think the last time we analyzed this, we had to add something like 2,000 units of housing to Sherborn to have a quarter of them be the 500 units that we needed to get to 10%. Because of course, every time you add more units, it adds the numerator and the denominator. So you're exactly right on the math. It's very frustrating, and there's nothing I can do about it. Sorry.
Thanks
Rick,
for the answer.
can I just add one quick point, since you made a political statement? And that is,
You feel free to defend the statute. That's fair.
No, I'm not going to defend the statute. I mean, I will, obviously, if you like, but that's not what I was going to say. What I was going to say is that I have been told by the state that they are wildly enthusiastic about projects like this. And the reason they're wildly enthusiastic is because in bigger multifamily projects, they don't get 4-bedroom affordable units. And there are very, very few 4-bedroom affordable units for larger families in need. And they really, really like seeing these from time to time. So just wanted to.
Yeah, a good fair ad, Bob, and I'll correct myself that all of the math on what units are good and not, and where and when and how, there's a lot of cross-cutting goods, as we say there, goods and bads. So that's the answer I'll have to give on that one. Any other questions on Greenwood Street from anybody at this time? Joni Murphy. Joni Murphy, your hand is up.
Yep, sorry, I was mute, of course. I understand that you're claiming that there's nothing you can do about it because of the 40B rules. As you can gather, the residents of Greenwood Street are extremely concerned about the well-being of our wells and septic, and the fact that 4 houses are being built where it's really zoned for 1 house. And as far as saying there's nothing that can be done, my understanding was an issue was raised at, I think, a Board of Health meeting about distance between septic and wells that raised concerns. So aren't there actually things that do present issues that should be addressed?
Well,
and isn't a priority to also maintain the safety of the homes and the health of the current residents, not just the new development?
okay, that's another good question, and there have been decades of fights about this, and the way those decades have settled out. And I see Dennis Murphy's here. He'll correct me if I get it wrong, and Haverty will as well. In general, the towns do have the rights to disapprove these 40Bs, but it has to be a moderately clear and health and safety based grounds for termination. So, for example, if there were good scientific report that these 4 septic systems would send excess nitrates into the wells of the people next door, potentially contaminating them, that could be grounds to turn this down. I do not think any of that data has appeared here yet. And I further believe that the offsets from the wells ultimately turned out to pass muster, but I'll let the Board of Health correct me.
Okay, I guess that's my cue.
Please.
Where to begin? I guess I'll start by saying that the Board of Health is local boards of health are given the responsibility to enforce Title V, if there are septic systems in the town, to both enforce Title V, and we have the authority and the responsibility to make additional regulations above and beyond what is the Title V is the minimum requirements for the state. And the burden that Mass DEP has when they set up these regulations is that they also have to look at the feasibility financially and the impacts from the regulations. So they're not going to have a more stringent regulation that could apply to a municipality that has municipal water and a sewer system that's managing things. And they might have a few properties that are outliers that, you know, are too far away from a sewer line and they have on-site septic systems, but they're getting municipal water supply. So the state is a minimum, and they fully expect local boards of health to appropriately adjust both well and septic. Well, we have to write the well regulations. They do not exist anywhere but at the local board of health level for private wells, but adjust the septic system regulations. And so the Board of Health in Sherborn over many years has been first prepared and then revised and continually revised regulations. And we think all of our regulations have meaningful impacts on what we experience in town. But we've also been through a number of 40B projects, and this is my personal opinion, I think part of it is that normally where larger housing projects are, and more development is in areas that are served by municipal systems. And so it's hard for people to get their head around what it means to have to rely on a single property to take care of your water supply and your septic disposal needs. And so we haven't seen a lot of empathy for why we have our regulations. And so I will say that Greenwood met most of our requirements, depth to groundwater being an important one. From the septic, bottom of the septic to historic high groundwater levels. We have yet to formally see the well plans. And really, as a board, we don't speculate on things. We wait until we're presented with something final for our review, and we haven't had that yet. But early indications are that the wells are not going to meet our requirements, and there are no other requirements besides ours. So I'm not quite sure how the board is going to decide on that when we get a chance to, and that's going to be a question for later on process and timing. So it's a challenge. It's all a challenge.
Well, let's jump to that process and timing. A development team, Bob DeShang, do you intend to use any 40B rights to deal with town of Sherborn well regulations on these projects?
Yeah, so Rick, I take exception to the characterization that we haven't told the Board of Health and you all exactly where the wells are going to be. They're on the site plan. And frankly, that's how it works. You know, the only difference is we haven't filled out a well permit, BOH well permit form, which is name and address, and you submit that with the plan. They have the plan, you have the plan. Those are not going to move. I can go through with you the distance.
But Bob, you're not answering my question. I agree with everything you're saying. My
Please.
question was, and maybe I didn't articulate it well, as far as you know now, do you intend to use any of your 40B powers
Yes.
to override local regulations with respect to the town wells?
Yes.
Okay, and which ones?
To the private wells. So lot 1 and lot 4 are compliant. There's one that is 100, it is required to be 125 feet under local, and it's 111, so we're missing by 14 feet. There are, on lot 2, there's a distance to both its own septic system and the septic system at the next door lot. Those two are also near misses, 129 feet and 126 feet. And they're required under the local to be 150 feet.
Okay, all right. And so
And this is all laid out, in great detail on the plans.
I understand it's laid out in great detail in the plans. Is there a waiver request document or a list of waivers on file with us that includes those?
Yes, I believe so. And
Okay.
what we had talked about early on, Rick, was that we had asked for more waivers than we ultimately believe that we will need. I think
Yeah.
now would be the time to go through and detail that more specifically. Am I right about that? Yeah.
Yeah, that's where I was going to go is can you get back to us now with your refined, these are the exact waivers we need for this project.
Yeah, and I think one of the things that would be really helpful, Rick, because, and I've said this before and I'll say it again, it's been my experience that I don't always have the same interpretation of Board of Health rules as the Board of Health does. So to the extent they could tell us where we think we are not meeting their regulations, that would be quite helpful, because
you're the
otherwise
developer, so you're the developer. This is mostly your obligation, but I will ask the Board of Health, to the extent that you see, Daryl and Mark, areas where you think he's going to need a waiver, please point them out. It's just
that's
courtesy.
all I'm asking for.
But
Rick. That's all I'm asking for. Yep.
We should not play hide the ball.
Okay, just to be
That'd be great.
clear, so for us, the submitting of the application is the indication that what we have before us is your best and final.
I certainly said that to you multiple times 2 weeks ago at your meeting. Daryl.
No, you have said that you will get back to us on the wells and that you're not addressing that at the time.
That is not correct, Daryl. That's not the conversation we have, and it's on video and we can all look at it. That's not the conversation we had. The wells are locked in. They are on the plan. They've been on the plan since we submitted the septic plan to you in October, and they have not moved. And I don't, what I have said to you is that your vote on Title V could not be, other than the fact that we've shown you the wells to be meeting Title V setbacks, which is 100 feet. Other than that, then you need to have the conversation with the ZBA, and that's what you're doing tonight, which is appropriate.
Okay. Couple of housekeeping matters here. One, I see all sorts of things popping up in the chat. Let me point out, as I always do, the chat is not part of the record. If it's helpful for people to see that, and we've got 67 participants. I'm not saying don't put things in the chat. Go ahead, so long as it's relevant and not scurrilous. Please put it in the chat. But it's not part of our record. So if you have something important, either the question that's in the chat or the answer that comes out, make sure it gets on the record in our recorded materials. Thank you. Well, I guess where I'm going to try to go on this one, I'm saying this mostly to the Board of Health and to the developer, is that I don't think we should close the hearing tonight because we're going to need a few more materials, but I would really like by the next meeting a nice concise set of revised waivers. Here's exactly what I think I need. And then in terms of the Board of Health, here's exactly the conditions we want you to put on the plan so that we've got something to work with.
And we have been tracking, as Mark reviews the plans, he's identified what does and does not meet our regulations, either water or septic.
Okay.
So we have been tracking that.
If you could share that with us, that'd be great. Thank you.
Maybe we come up with our own lists, and then we could compare them and see if we come up with the same thing.
Absolutely. All we want to do is make sure that I giving Rick the right list of waivers. That's the goal. And because sometimes your interpretations of your rules differ from what I would think would be the proper interpretation, I think it'd be helpful if we compared notes, and I'm grateful. Thank you.
And please do, because if you disagree with the Board of Health, you can say, I think they're wrong in this, but I'm asking for a waiver even if they're right.
That's exactly right.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Okay.
exactly. That's my
We're
point.
aligned.
Yep.
Yeah, we're aligned. Kelly Aducci, no, I'm sorry, Deshaun, you had your hand up first.
Yeah, I just to address maybe give a factual information for the neighbors. I fully understand everyone live there would concern any new projects to whatever they are trying to get the thing straight. I want to make sure the thing straight is the 4-lot septic to all the neighbors well meet the local bylaw. And the well separations between all wells or any other wells meet the local bylaw. And the only issue or variance I'm thinking of regarding the well is the distance to our own septic systems. And thirdly, all the neighbors are located upgrading of our septic systems. So if there's any impact, so it's probably at less impact compared with our own wells. So that's just a fact. That doesn't mean our own wells is not important. That just purely pointed out that's the facts, and that's the site limitation and restriction. We did our best to meet everything we think. So most of the systems are quite far away from wetlands. It's probably all 100 feet away. So that's another thing. It's twice as Title V would require to the wetlands. So I just give you some of those facts check, and definitely we can come in up list of variants. So the zonings is clearly spelled out on our septic design about only lot size is require variance, and all others meet the local zoning bylaw setbacks. So
All right. Thank you. Kelly Aducci next, and then I'm going to try to pull these threads together and respond to Joni Murphy's question of, well, so what can the neighbors do about this? But Kelly, please go ahead first.
That was what I was going to ask about, is what can the neighbors do about this?
Okay.
Sorry, Kelly Aducci, 46 Greenwood Street. So if this project is approved either by the Board of Health and ZBA or by 40B exceptions, what happens if something happens down the road to our water or the water of those living in the new homes after the project begins? Like, what recourse do we as homeowners have? Just because you are saying there's no scientific evidence at this moment in time doesn't mean that there won't be problems down the road, especially if we're getting waivers around the septic. So I have a lot of concern about down the road, especially as someone else already brought up that it didn't perk years ago. Now it's perking. Things can obviously change. So it's very concerning to me that we don't seem to have any recourse.
Rick, can I make one quick correction?
No, Bob,
Kelly, they did perk.
Bob, you are not the board. You're the proponent. Please wait. Thank you. Okay. Kelly, another fair question. There is no guarantee for any of us. There's a new house going up across the street from me. It's possible their septic system will contaminate my well. It doesn't seem very likely, but it could happen. And I wouldn't have a whole lot of recourse there. So embedded in your question is the normal one of, well, so who's going to pay if the bed is wrong here? And it's probably maybe the town's going to have to pay, not for having made a bad decision in granting the permit, but just because when people's wells go bad, it tends to be a municipal level problem.
Okay.
Joni Murphy, in terms of how the neighbors would attack this if they were trying to attack it. The one case where this was all upheld is the case we've all heard too much about, the Stowe case, where a 40B was turned down by a town based on evidence that the nitrate loading from the new septic system from the 40B would contaminate the wells. And there's a lot of debate about how strong that evidence has to be, how good the connection has to be, et cetera, et cetera. But it cannot just be speculative. It can't be just, well, I'm worried about it. But what people have done is hire outside groundwater experts who say, well, the nitrate loading here is going to be above the allowed level in my wells because of this new project next door. And if you want to see examples of it, just keep listening and look at the stuff on the Farm Road project, because that is one of the accusations there, which the development team disagrees with. Bob, now, okay, go ahead.
I apologize, Rick.
Yeah,
I think science is really important. And what Kelly said was that earlier developers had failed to perk, and perk is how fast the water drains. That was never an issue on this land. This land has always perked. The problem that other developers ran into was the depth to groundwater. We moved to a different location where the depth to groundwater is deeper and it was better. So it's not as though we've pulled some trick here. It's always perked, and we found a better place for depth to groundwater. And I just wanted to make sure the science is out there, because I don't want people to have the wrong impression about what's going on. Thank you.
Okay, fair enough. Jody Murphy, I was trying to answer your question. Sounds like I missed. Go ahead.
Nope, you answered my question, but I do have a follow-up, and it might be a stupid question. Why is it the residents' responsibility and not the town's to do that sort of checking?
Why is it the rest? Oh, because the that is not the way 40B works. You know, as part of the peer review here, we did have our peer reviewer, Tetra Tech, look at the septic plans. They thought they were okay. They did not think they proposed new serious risks, but if you're really serious about it and you're really worried about it, you have to go hire your own people.
Okay.
I'm sorry, but that's it's like we have a lot of non-40Bs in town where somebody's blasting and everyone's concerned about their wells being contaminated from the blasting, and the answer is get your well tested and go hire your own people. Mr. Moore, briefly.
Good evening, Brian Moore, 49 Farm Road. I just wanted to qualify DeShang's comments. DeShang's comments were about how this 40B would be compliant relative to the existing neighbors. The one thing that he didn't mention was that for the people who are going to purchase these homes, including those who are going to purchase below market rate homes, they will not be compliant with town law. And I think it is a misrepresentation to state otherwise. Thank you.
Okay. Meredith Weslowski.
Yeah, I just wanted to make sure it gets into the record. I remember earlier in the session, may have been Daryl, might have been somebody else, did mention that a perk test had been done by an earlier developer and it failed. My recollection from talking with that developer is also him letting us know as the direct abutters at 34 Greenwood Street that parcel, he could not find an adequate perk location, at least for what he had planned. So I just want to add that, as far as I know, that I have heard that both from the prior potential developer and once other in this meeting.
Right, and that sometimes happens because this property failed the perk test. Often actually covers a whole bunch of things that aren't technically the perk test, like high groundwater or other issues. So that it may be that people were just not being super precise there. DeShang, unless there's a compelling reason to go into this right now, I'd like to try to move on. It is 7:49. We're cutting heavily into the time for a much larger project with much more live issues. And what I'd like to do at this point, board members, I'm looking to you, is suggest that we not close the hearing tonight, that we continue it. Bob, we would need an extension for that. I'd propose for this one.
Actually, Rick, I don't think you do for.
Oh, that's right, because this one's a little longer, isn't it? how long do we have on this, Haverty? I know you've got that at your fingertips.
I do not have that at my fingertip, Mr. Chairman.
I think you've got approximately another month, Rick.
Okay, all right. So in that case, I'd like to continue this hearing, and let's talk about a date that we could use for both of these projects, board members. Bob, I know you suggested February 5th. I don't have my calendar up here, but board members, I don't want it to be too short, not because there's a lot of wood to chop here on Greenwood Street, but because the subsequent hearing for Farm Road Homes will also be on the same date. And so setting it for a week out is probably just not going to be practical.
That's 3 weeks, Rick.
Okay.
Almost 3
So
weeks.
so we're at the 16th. Well, board members, how do you feel about the 5th? I've lost my screens here. Where are my board members? There they are. Mr. Fitch.
I have no objection to the 5th.
Okay. Mr. Labby.
Yeah, nor do I. The 5th could work for me.
Mr. McBride.
5th works for me as well.
All right, so let's continue this hearing until, and is that a Monday night? I had just checked.
Yes, it is.
All right.
February 5th is a Monday.
Monday, February 5th, 7 p.m. So that's my motion. I move that we continue Greenwood Street to Monday, February 5th, 7 p.m.
I second that motion.
Any further discussion? Hearing none. All right, we have to vote this by roll call. All in favor say aye. Novak votes aye.
Fitch, aye.
Labby, aye.
McBride, aye.
Okay, motion carries. Monday, February 5th, 7 p.m. Thank you, everybody, for your thoughtful views. Greenwood Street abutters, if you're serious about doing a deep dive on the legal compliance and the wells and stuff, I definitely suggest that you read the materials on the Farm Road project, because it's a good set of what does and does not work. So there we go. All right, moving along to our next continued hearing, Farm Road Homes, for which there are an awful lot of live balls and an awful lot of new material came in. Maybe I'll just do a quick recap. I know, Dennis Murphy, that we got a new letter from you. I believe you reiterated your previously stated position, and I don't think we need to hear Paul Haverty's position, which is different, that there's a title restriction here that is, in your view, fatal, and in Paul's view, something we should do nothing about. I think you also mentioned in your letter the status of the solar. I don't have your I read your letter a couple of days ago. There have been so many filings on this. Do you want to tell us what your position was on that, sir?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. So the comprehensive permit application calls for solar use, and as an accessory residential use, that's fine if it's providing power for that particular residence. But what I think we learned recently is that the objective here is that it's to sell power back to the grid. It's not just for power to the individual homes. And I'm not aware of any of the, at this point, hundreds of 40Bs that I've been involved in that have also included permission for solar. So that's why I mentioned that it is in the PE letter as an issue that should be investigated as part of the public hearing. I do do some solar. I've never done it in a 40B, and I don't think the Sherborn ZBA ought to get into the business of doing that either.
Okay. And it turns out, happily or unhappily, I'm in the solar business too. And everybody who has solar on their house sells it back to the grid. That is just inherent in a net metering state, which Massachusetts is. So I think the issue here we need to explore is not so much that power gets sold back to the grid, but I think Ms. Neutra sent in a letter. I guess, Bob, the way I would characterize this is, if this solar is going to be 100% owned by the 40B condo owners, and it's their solar that they own, they operate, they're going to have their little interconnection agreement with Eversource, just like everybody else with a single family residence does. And you're asking as part of your 40B approvals to have the location of those residences panels be allowed to be in a setback where maybe they otherwise wouldn't be. Seems to me that's probably okay, although if some of the other lawyers think that's not and have good grounds, I'd be glad to hear from them. But what I thought I was reading in the colloquy back and forth between you and Marion is this is actually kind of a separate entity and a separate project. And that would not be okay. Let me just characterize what would not be okay, which is that Solar Development LLC is going to own and operate and have all the credits and do all the net metering for the solar that's on this site. And it just happens to be located on a 40B location. And I don't think a 40B development can come in, get the side yard variance waivers under 40B, put them in their pocket, and then hand them to a separate entity. So it maybe I don't have your project correct.
Well,
So
I guess
straighten me out, please.
I would say, Rick, it's somewhere in between the two things that you described. So, and as you might imagine, things are not fully fleshed out. It's my sense that what would happen, first of all, being in the solar business, you're aware that the money is put up by investors. It's not typically in an array situation like that. The money wouldn't come from a condo association. That's not how condo associations work. And I don't think that's practical. However, and it's sort of a question back to you. If the power is being primarily sold back into that community, and it's simply that an LLC is providing the capital to make it happen, but I'm sorry, somebody's speaking.
Yeah. Sarah and Tess, there we go. I think it was just somebody who was off mute, Bob. Go ahead, please keep going.
Sure. So what I'm saying is that it's my intent that the vast majority of the power would be sold back into the community. Of course, it has to be something that the community, that each member of the community decides to buy the power or not, right? That's always their choice. But the concept would be that the power would, it does go back to the grid, you're right, but then it gets sold, and it gets sold to specific people. In the case of affordable housing, there's a huge push by both the state and the federal government for solar developers to create power for affordable housing. Obviously, in this project, we'll have 8 affordable homes. And I'd be very surprised if folks didn't buy the power, but I can't guarantee it until we get there, right?
Okay. But I think we're going to have a legal problem that we're not going to be able to solve tonight, because only the 40B development, only the housing gets the zoning setback exemptions. And you're trying to transfer those zoning setback exemptions to what's essentially going to be a separate project owned by the tax credit investors, owning and operating a solar site. And I don't think a solar operation is a qualified 40B entity.
I'll let Paul comment on that. I don't.
Well, Bob, I think we can have this discussion offline.
Sure.
Okay. Yeah, we're not going to try to solve it tonight.
As a practical matter, Rick, I just point out to the community that I'm seeking a variance to a setback to town forest up on the northern part of the site. And the primary reason for seeking that waiver of the setback is to reduce cutting trees. In other words, if we're pushed off the property line, we'll have to cut more trees. And, that's
Okay,
a
well,
laudable goal, to cut fewer
You,
trees.
you can take the trees hostage, but 40B's setback variances are only available to 40B projects. That's what I think I'm trying to say, and
Fair enough,
maybe I'm
fair enough.
wrong, and the other lawyers can correct me, but I think that's how it works. We could just to give an example, if the 40B included a McDonald's to feed the residents, which is a good thing. You could not say we're going to blow off all the town's regulations on a McDonald's and put it right next to the neighbor using 40B powers and then say, oh yeah, but it's going to a franchisee. And that's an extreme example, but that's the concept.
So, Mr. Chairman, there is in fact the ability to acquire waivers under Chapter 40B for non-residential components, but the regulations allow a board to deny that if that non-residential component is not allowed as of right in the underlying zoning. Question as to whether or not, solar would qualify under that, given the fact that it's an exempt use under Chapter 48, Section 3, gets a little complicated. So that's why I suggested we just have this conversation offline.
I agree, and it might very well be that the solar could proceed under either DPU exemption or under some 48.3, thou shalt not condition my special permit, a non-40B exemption, but I'm just asking the development team to think about that precisely and get back to us.
Yep, well, we'll do that.
Fair enough. Okay. Ms. Neutra, does that meet your concern or?
Yeah, that answers a lot of my concern. My general concern is that we just didn't have information on how it would be, I understand you may not know exactly how it'll be financed, but exactly how it would work once it's built in terms of benefits to the whole development, not just the affordable housing, but the entire development that owns the land that's going to be under the array and presumably leases an easement on that land, or however they do it. You probably know better than I, to allow solar to be built there. It seems to me that we should know something about that in order to be able to judge the business and legality of it.
No, we need to move on, but all I will say is that it is my intent that community benefit to the extent possible, affordable and market rate homes.
Right, you did mention in your response to me, which I do appreciate, you answered some of my questions and thank you for that. You did mention that you anticipate the residents might get something like a 10 or 20% deduction on their electric bill, but I'm not sure how you can write that into this and guarantee anything like that when the facility, as you said, is going to produce an amount of power equal to the needs of that community. It seems like a very stingy benefit. So anyway, we just need more information. So I'll leave it at that.
And if you think the permitting and thinking of a 40B is complex, solar projects and battery energy storage are 100 times harder.
I agree, but try us.
Yeah, no. I'm just saying the task to which we are putting Bob and Paul is not an easy one filled with easy answers. So there's some wood to chop there, as we say.
Yeah, agree.
Okay, Deshaun Wang, your hand is up, sir.
Yes, I happen have done two solar array 1.5 megawatt system. So if I understand right, I'm just trying to make sure we all get it right, is all the power generated is going to the residents at their choice through wire the grid. This is not really, they sell the power to the grid by net metering, if I understand from my two project experience. And the resident will benefit definitely, as Bob described, 10 to 20% discount. And at the same time, they have a choice not to use it. I believe they can choose not to use the solar, but buy the power from other people. I think that's just my understanding from my experience.
Right. Okay, so we'll just put a pin in that as a big complicated question that we need to hear more from the development team on. And the people around the project who are less supportive of it and interested in this, it's a good chance for you to sharpen up with your solar people and make sure that it's being done properly and correctly. I'm okay. We had some new site designs for site design issues that were raised by the weather gods in the last several weeks for us in terms of some unexpected flooding, not all of which occurred in my basement, and some ice accumulations. And I know that a bunch of materials, including drone photos, came in. Development team, what's your position on that?
Our position is that it should be fully analyzed by people with science and engineering degrees. And we are going to take a good hard look at it and come back to the board with the analysis. What we're not in favor of is citizen science. It needs to be engineered and precise. And I feel like Steve, representing the peer review and you folks, is very, very good. And we'll be working with him to understand what these weather events mean or don't mean for the project.
Okay, and that was where I was going to ask you to go, which is whatever you decide to do from an engineering standpoint, would you loop in Steve as you do it, just so that hopefully when it comes back to us, the smart engineers have thought about it and they think the fix is A, B, C, D, E, F, G.
Exactly. Thank you. Yes.
Steve, I see you, and I assume that you would something you could do for us.
That's correct, Mr. Chairman.
All right. Okay. The next thing on my list, and then right after this, I want to get to drinking water because that is a biggie. I think Bob, Farm Road Homes had submitted responses to Tetra Tech's latest letter. Steve Booley, did you have a chance to see all the responses to your letters? And were those satisfactory to you, or were there any of those that you wanted further rebuttal on, or what's your position?
We did read through them. You know, I thought, you know, they were okay. So I don't have any real issues. The bigger item was receiving a letter from the fire department, which dealt with a lot of the safety oriented issues. So I think we're good with a lot of these.
Okay. Unless anyone in the group, and by that I mean the board members of any of the three boards or any of the members of the public object, I'd like to move to a big issue that the development team had asked us to deal with, which was try to come to a decision, at least at the level of a straw poll for the board, on public water supply versus private. Whoops, iPhone has their hand up. Who are you, iPhone?
Sorry, Rick. Hi, it's Mary Moore, 49 Farm Road. I just had a clarifying question about the response to the fire chief concerns that were, I think, raised and mostly resolved. But one of the things I heard or read in it was that there would be no on-street parking. And I just wanted to understand how that works, you know, when people have guests over, and is it a feasible, you know, way to build a development?
Would you like me to address that, Rick?
Yes, please, sir.
So the answer to that is that we have a number of guest parking spaces down probably about a third of the way deep into the community. It had a solar canopy. Hopefully we'll have a solar canopy. But there's a number of guest parking spaces there. And importantly, the aprons to the garages provide a lot of potential for guest parking as well. So my experience, you know, I worried a lot at Abbey Road about guest parking, and it turns out it just, you know, we have way more than enough guest parking at Abbey Road, and I anticipate that will be the case here as well.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Okay. Daryl Beardsley. Daryl, your hand was up.
Okay, yeah, sorry. I just wanted to let you know that I was able to get more information that I had been seeking on water supply issues. You can do your straw poll and let me know if and when you'd like me to share the information.
No. Share the information. We're trying to get it all out on the table.
Okay. All right. I'm going to bring up. Hold on. I have to get this set up. Just a moment. Okay, so to make it easier, maybe for you, I took the prior deck of slides and I've amended them. So it's all in one document. I thought that might be easier. I started doing a new one with separate issues, but whoops. Okay, so that's the same issue. I seem to have disabled something. Excuse me a minute. All right.
I don't think Leyland Farms has over 50% affordable units, but that has nothing to do with the water
Yeah, I think
supply.
it's 51% or in the low 50s.
Disagree, but
it's actually 10 out of 17 are affordable, Rick.
okay. Oh, Leyland Farms. I'm sorry. I had mentally was thinking of 59 North Main Street. Of course, Leyland Farms, highly. Yeah, I beg your pardon.
Okay. So I went through their records that DEP has on their website about public water supplies. I don't even know how many, and it's not possible to search merely by size. So I went through and I just plucked off a few examples from their database. So I just wanted to share this to show that there are projects that I kind of divided it one so I could fit it, but so here's below 100 and here's some above 100. So I think, some of these are closer to certainly the approximate 152 people, I believe, that would be at Farm Road. So just to give you an idea, scattered throughout the state. Different things, apartments, condos, housing authorities, mobile home parks, retirement, just a variety of things. Okay. That's the same. This is basically the same. What I was able to confirm is they have categories for the upfront permitting costs, and I had a range of $3,000 to $15,000 prior, and that was because I hadn't been able to confirm how they would assign costs to a public water supply that was made up of multiple wells, whether those fees would be applied to each well within a well field, essentially, for a public water supply, or one. And as long as it's under 70 gallons per minute for all the sources, then it would just be these two fees, which is, in the $3,000 range. The other thing I wanted to highlight, just on the strictly Mass DEP side, as we've talked about, and certainly people from Abbey Road have talked about how difficult it is to manage something that doesn't have a formal structure but is shared. And so when you become a PWS, DEP has a form that they call the Water Supply Business Plan, and you fill in the blanks on things, and it's multiple pages, and it guides you through, and it establishes, among other things, a requirement for setting up an escrow account by a way of accumulating funds for the time when inevitably your water system will need some kind of operation, maintenance, repair, adjustment, amendment. So that's provided through them. That has been applied to all those other projects I just showed you in the past. So, and then there was a concern about the difference I think the peer reviewer had expressed this, about the difference in the quantity testing that's done up front, whether it's under Board of Health, private well regulations, or as a PWS. So the board has, for these larger projects in the past, established requirements for extended pump tests, more requests on 40B projects, to help understand, especially when you're putting bedrock wells fairly close together, their potential to impact one another exists, and therefore you need to test them simultaneously, or you're really not going to get one-by-one testing is not going to give you a good understanding of what the true yields will be over long-term use. And so I just wanted to clear up that even for this, the layout is currently proposed for individual wells, we would be asking that the kind of pump testing that would happen for PWS happen for this project to assure that the water supplies are reliable going into it. And part of that is, as I think I've mentioned before, that the first step on developing a property or setting up housing is to ensure that there's a water supply. First step for housing issues. And that's why we deal with the wells first on projects in town before the septic. We've gone over this. All right. So this is just information from Mass DP about how you would establish the zone 1 around multiple bedrock wells that were being combined and fed into a single point for public water supply system. So the short of this is that if the wells are within 50 feet of one another, then they might combine wells, combine those wells that are close together and determine a zone 1 that would be based on their combined yield. Otherwise, they might look at the wells individually. And I'll send over this to you for more, certainly ask questions. We talked about some of the advantages of a public water supply. We talked about resiliency. There's also the economies of scale testing. And we talked about testing that one distribution point rather than every well, every time people within the project wanted to understand what was going on with their water. The locating of the wells can be less complicated because you don't have to set it up for the same kind of tie of ownership between the well and the residents it serves. Again, that's a determination to be made by others, not by Board of Health. We review the plans that come to us, but it is certainly possible. Also, this is a quote from DEP that the zone 1s of wells, whether they're bedrock or overburden, are allowed to overlap. So there's not any additional limitation on behavior then. And then in terms of site infrastructure layout, again, the layers of the utility lines of all sorts and the required distances between them, I would imagine that there can be some streamlining of a design with a PWS versus trying to maintain those connections between whatever cluster of residences is being served by a particular well. Just complicates things. So that's that minor update on well issues.
All right. Thank you very much. Can you stop sharing your screen, please?
Yes.
And you've sent all that into Jeannie so it can go up in the town website?
No, I will send it into her.
Okay. All right. Yes, please do so. All right. And development team, I'll bet you don't agree with all of that. I bet your position is somewhat closer to, we think private is better, faster, more efficient, etc. Maybe you could quickly recap that just so that people who haven't been on all the, I know you've said it before and I'm asking you to say it again briefly, just so it's on the record at the same time, please.
Sure. So a couple of points. One is that Mass DEP has determined, it's preliminary, but as long as you don't move anything around or do anything terribly different, it's a determination that we are not subject under our proposal to be a public water supply. If we were to be required to be a public water supply, and I'll let Paul address if he wants to the issue of whether you can in fact do that, but I'll just talk about why it's a bad idea. One, you're going to force us to put wells because of the radius that the circle that has to be put around the public water supply wells. We'd be forced to move the wells to a much worse location. The wells would go closer to the neighbors' wells. The wells would go much, much closer to our own septic system, and they would be on the side of a hill and incredibly expensive to build and to maintain. I think Daryl's characterization of the cost of being a public water supply once you're there, and that's before you spend a humongous amount of money to develop them, particularly in this case because of the location that it forces. Being a public water supply is very complicated and very hard. And I would point to, Daryl put up Leland Farms and Woodhaven as an example of how public water supplies work well. I think Jeff over on the select board will tell you that's not true. They've had a bear of a time with their public water supplies, and they're currently spending hundreds of thousands of dollars of ARPA money to resolve the issues with their public water supplies. And that it doesn't make any sense. It's, under our proposal, we're able to put the wells up bordering the town forest, undeveloped town forest land, much, much further away from everyone else. And so anyway, summary, it's way more expensive to develop. And in fact, who knows if it's even possible, and way more expensive to maintain and not as safe for the residents. Thank you.
All right, thank you, and thank you particularly for being so concise. Mr. Haverty, do you have some words for us on why we can't possibly do this anyway, even if we want to?
Certainly, Mr. Chairman. I'm not aware of any authority that would allow, either a Board of Appeals sitting on a 40B application or even a Board of Health on a regular application to instruct an applicant that they are required to go forward as a public water supply when DEP has informed them that in fact they don't meet the standards and are not required to be a public water supply. I'm not aware of any local rule or requirement that would be applicable in this matter. I think if you were to require this project to be a public water supply, despite DEP stating that it's not, I think you're violating General Laws Chapter 40B, Section 20, which states that you can't treat subsidized housing differently than unsubsidized housing. So,
okay. Mr. Fenno, you had your hand up before. Do you agree with that position, or did you have something else you were going to raise?
Oh, no, this was a different matter. I can either address it another time. Nope, thank you.
Okay. Okay. Daryl Beardsley. Is your hand still up by accident, or did you?
No, it's up intentionally. So I'd like to clarify. I think that there's a misunderstanding about what a public water supply is when I keep saying these combining multiple wells into a public water supply. You could use the wells as they are currently identified on the plan and just connect them all to one point, and that would become a public water supply.
We don't own we don't own the radius, Daryl. That's the problem.
And as I've mentioned before at the meeting, DEP has said that if you get an agreement in place with the landowner, which is the town, and if the town is willing, so there are steps to be taken, but that they will accept an appropriate agreement that has the landowner honoring the restrictions for the Zone 1.
Well,
okay,
but the problem is we're also developing on the other side of the radius downhill. In other words, our homes are within the Zone 1 radius for a public water supply as proposed.
And perhaps one could
unless you
move,
let
I
me
don't want to
go.
debate where you could move it, but you could probably move closer to the property line or something else, or spread it out differently.
all right.
But anyway,
I
so that's
disagree.
one point.
I
And
disagree.
It's hard for me with my one wounded hand to make
Yes.
the timeout sign, but I'm going to make the timeout sign anyway, which is, I think it's fairly clear, if I'm hearing the development team correctly, that they could not, as of right, leave all the wells where they are and make them a public water supply.
Correct.
So, doesn't mean it can't be done. They just can't do it as of right. Ipsy Dixit, they just decided to do it.
all right. Sorry, I misspoke.
Yeah, that's okay. It may be a fair burden. It's okay.
It could be shifting around. In any case, the other example about Leland and Woodhaven wells, I reached out and spoke with one of the certified water system operators with Whitewater, who's the firm that the town uses, and spoke to them about the issues at these two locations. And some of their issues are very special, such as Woodhaven was built before there were the same restrictions on lead solder being used for pipes. So there's a great deal of expense going to adjusting the water quality to not be leaching the lead out of those lines to the same extent, and replacement of lines and what have you. And that is very expensive. The other, and I also spoke with DPW about the issues at these two developments, but part of the cost too is that for the resiliency that we're advocating for a public water supply rather than these individual wells, is that's what they're doing. One well was not performing as well, and so they're merging it, and a lot of the cost is going to that. These are not typical costs with all public water supplies. This is a very special circumstance, and they did survive and were viable for a very long time until they encountered these issues in the downtown area, including PFAS. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Rebecca Honeywell, please. Oops, you're muted. Sorry. Still muted. Jeannie, did you do this?
I did not.
Okay.
Doesn't have the mute icon on, so I bet you there's something up with her microphone.
Yeah, might be. Yeah, Sarah Raggy, are you trying to raise your physical hand instead of your electronic hand?
Yes.
All right, we'll accept the physical hand this one time.
Thank you. I just, it's not only about the water quality, which is number one concern, but it's also about a system that multiple homeowners are sharing, and how equitable it is for the distribution costs to be sectioned off in groups, in what I would call blocks, so that one block may get lucky and not have any expenses, and one block may incur thousands of dollars worth of expenses. And I'm wondering how many people will be living in this development that are even familiar with wells and septic systems. And then they're hit with this really a puzzle it's very hard to solve. So I think that should be taken into consideration, as well as the water quality.
All right, thank you. Eric Johnson.
Yeah, thank you. I won't completely iterate what I said last time. I think you all know I support a public water supply, certainly. I do know that I think the applicant had said that they would try to match that, same level of water quality testing, which will also add a certain cost as well. I just, let's say one thing that's a little reiterative, and that's that this will help for future contaminants 50, 60 years from now, when these buildings are around and not many of us are, that, it'll still be a well-maintained, well taken care of water supply for generations to come. The other note I will say that's new is that, if the radii of the zone 1 does go into, let's say, Sherborn Town Forest or something like that, I certainly, to whatever extent I can do as a select board member, would advocate for that to be preserved and advocate that to have a conservation restriction, which they do for zone 1s. As a point of trivia, water supply preservation is actually the second most efficient or second most common use of land preservation across the country. And I certainly would advocate for it. I think it's a good idea here. I believe strongly in water supply and preservation of watersheds. And I think this will certainly do that. And I also think, for future contaminant testing and all the other reasons stated beforehand, it'd be the best thing to do for the owners of this development and future owners generations to come.
All right, thank you. And while Rebecca Honeywell has left us and gone to another place, she's come back in the form of her iPhone.
I came back on my phone. I have no idea what's going on with my speaker. Sorry about that. I'm like, it's unmuted. It's not working now. Anyway, I just want to make 2 comments. The first one is it's really important to have affordable housing. We need it in Sherborn, but it's really important that we have potable water and affordable housing. So if something changes or if something is of concern, I'm sure the Board of Health might need the state to weigh in with regulating the quality of the drinking water. And the only benefit that I can think of is having a public water supply is that there's someone else helping enforce the drinking water laws for the residents. The other point that I want to make is that it's also true that if there's any concern that the proponents of the project are worried about being close to the threshold where the state might change their mind or something might happen where the local board feels that it's important to be considered a public water supply, it is possible to make the project smaller and then it wouldn't have that problem. So there are ways to get around it if you don't want to have it be a public water supply. And there are potential risks to the quality of the drinking water, which of course we need to pay attention to because of our private wells and our fragile resources.
Okay, thank you very much. I haven't seen anybody from groundwater protection speak up yet, but they did send in a detailed memo with some supporting materials that I would recommend to everybody, for especially the board members, for reading and evaluation. Michael Lesser,
54 Forest Street. Besides supporting the public water supply for the resilience issue and the sort of a fairness of sharing issue risks, I just want to point out that I acknowledge that probably the public water supply would be more expensive, everybody, and it might be much more expensive. But I think less than talking about the relative costs, there's the issue of what is the absolute cost. And it might be significant, but it still might be quite bearable, even in an affordable housing project, for the benefits that it provides on a lot of things. So that just want to make sure that you don't get too hung up on relative cost versus the fact that whether the absolute cost is not, given that what's existed in other projects is not unbearable by even affordable housing projects. Thank you.
okay, thank you very much. It's 8:33. Rebecca, were you trying to speak or are you just not on mute?
No, I'm done. Sorry.
Okay, thank you, sir.
I'm on my phone. I didn't realize that I had to put it back on.
It's all good. Thank you very much for your input. Mr. Johnson, Eric Johnson.
I'm sorry, I did before. I've heard both sides say that, DEP will allow this, allow that, whatever else. I guess one, it'd be nice to see some stuff in writing just to kind of confirm that. And two, be interested to see what DEP prefer. I know there's some black and white, but there are also gray zones within this. I think if this requirement went into the zoning board decision, I do believe it would stand up to scrutiny and legal review. Maybe I'm wrong, but I do believe because it's reasonable. You're looking for a public water supply for really what DEP intended public water supplies. So you can create poles, you can do little things, you can put dots all over the place that you can just avoid it. But this clearly is a dense development, relatively dense development, which was intended to have a public water supply. And I'd be very interested if someone asked DEP, showed them both and say, which do you prefer? Which would you support between the two alternatives? And, you know, I'm confident DP would actually support a public water supply. And I think this would stand up to legal scrutiny as well. And I meant to say that before. I'm so sorry to come back in again.
All right. Thank you. Deshaun Wang, quickly. You're muted, sir. Sorry.
Just two things to consider. One is we all know SpaceX and the NASA. So I think if you're launching satellite or rockets, it probably should be the government job. And I don't know if the government mandatory that you cannot have a private spaceship. I don't think we will have a SpaceX, Elon Musk. That's just from that thought.
Which way does that cut?
No, then I want to coming back to what is the key. So we are arguing the legal issue. So I think the most important thing is to coming up a mechanism to make sure we have a good quantity and also good quality water for the residents. And as Bob just stated, that's a very important thing. It's not just legally to satisfy net radius, but also from the overall looking of the settings. So if we are pushing to the public water supply to satisfy that legal purity requirements, it's going to make the siting much worse than it would be. Then you have the flexibility to put the private settings. And so as we meet with the peer reviewer, at the meeting, we went through the site, they see the settings over there. So where the septic is going to be located and where the wells is going to be located. So if we are pushing to the public water supply, that siting is going to be put in much closer, as Bob said, that's true. And that the impact to other sensitive protected groundwater recharge like the wetlands will be much closer than what it would be. So I just want to make sure we are getting to the essentials, not just for the legality. And so we kind of out of the box thinking to make sure we will have a good testing, and I had 100% support and a good thorough program for water quality testing, because that's the key. That's our key. So thank you.
Okay, thank you. Daryl, if you have something new and something very quick.
It's probably too much hearsay in terms of what DEP people have said to the Board of Health in the past in various meetings about why can't we get some of these things to be public water supplies.
Okay.
But I do agree with Bob that they made a determination that as currently laid out, that it does not have to be a public water supply as currently laid out.
Right.
And that's what their determination was, and they will not express a preference normally.
Okay. Rebecca, quickly, something new.
I was just going to say, there is one advantage of having it be regarded as a public water supply, and that is that the drinking water laws would apply and they would be enforced by DEP. Right now, it's an individual risk, and people have to sue their neighbors or the town.
Right. Yep. Same problem all of us have. If my neighbor's a bad neighbor and screws up all of our wells, it's a problem. And by the way, I don't have any such bad neighbors. That's a mythical beast I'm making up. Okay, and Rebecca, could I ask you to lower your electronic hand?
Yes, I'm trying to figure out how to do that on my phone. Sorry about that.
Okay, whatever.
Thank you.
All right, I'd really like to hear at this point from my silent partner board members on where they are, having listened to all of this carefully. And Mr. McBride, I'm going to pick on you first. What is your thinking based on everything you've heard right now, public versus private?
Trying to wrestle with Mr. Haverty's legal advice earlier in terms of what we can and cannot require, but I think from my perspective on ensuring the quality and quantity and equitable distribution and the risks of one well underperforming compared to the others. I think the public water supply seems to be the most appropriate path forward, in my opinion.
Okay, thank you. We did visit the issue of legality of requiring a public water supply in the fields of Sherborn, and it did not appear to be in question because it was a safety-based item. And it's, if we had 15 similarly sized projects that were on private, and then we picked on a affordable project and said that one has to be public, then I think Mr. Haverty's argument would have legs, but I don't think we have those facts in this town.
We do in Abbey Road, Rick.
That's one, and it has
Abbey
its
Road,
own problems.
It does not have
Well,
any problems.
Well,
Those issues were related to fire suppression, Rick.
All right. Ms. Raggy, who is one of your owners, uses it as the example of some difficulties of private. It doesn't mean, and it's right next, and it's right next to Woodland and Leyland, which are public and also have problems. So folks, there's no magic solution here.
Quick question, Bob, how many wells and how many units quickly were you
There
proposing?
are five wells at Abbey Road.
And 30, how many units? 30 units?
There are 18 units.
17, 18. Much smaller. Okay. Mr. Labby, where'd you go? There you are.
Yes, I'm here. I believe in our last meeting, I think you had put it to us or requested some insight in terms of where we stood. My concerns there were with the testing of water quality, but also the administrative rigor around that and how that is enforced. And I think that the state structure that is provided for a public water supply is a robust one and a difficult one to replicate in a measurable and reliable fashion. I'd also like the equitability of, from a maintenance perspective, and also monitoring for flow. So for those reasons, I continue to be in favor of a public water supply.
Okay, fair enough. Thank you. Mr. Fitch, esteemed litigator, thoughtful guy, where are you on this? You're on mute. You're still on mute. There you go.
Thank you for that very generous introduction, Rick. Well, at the risk of maybe stating a view that is not a majority view of the people present, I think that the private water supply is the most advantageous way to go. We're supposed to be assessing the health and safety impact of the water supply here, and I haven't heard anyone convincingly argue that a private water supply will pose health and safety risks that are objective and measurable, and would be a basis for denying this project. The applicant wants to go forward with the private water supply, and I appreciate the kind of economic cost benefit analyses that have been presented to us by Daryl and others, but I really don't think that it's ultimately relevant to our decision. And I do have my very firm doubts about whether we can compel the applicant to adopt a public water supply system. So.
Okay, well, we are allowed to disagree. As a matter of fact, that's why there's a whole bunch of us, isn't there? Where we get to better results by hearing each other's views. I come down on the side of the public, but for exactly your reasoning, which is safety. And the safety is what Daryl calls resilience, I call it dependability. When one well goes out, those people have nothing. If it's a public water supply, you just shut off that one and draw off the others. And that safety feature is for me the key for a public water supply. I think we could, from a safety standpoint of testing, we could probably replicate it by just putting a difficult enough regime around the privates that they'd be tested essentially as if they were publics. And the testing side of things can be replicated, but the resiliency side, I don't think can be. And we all know that wells don't all, we've all known situations where somebody's well goes dry or isn't working well, and the identical neighbor next door with the same well, put in the same pumping company, within 2 years, same depth, same everything, works perfectly because they hit the magic crack in the rock or whatever. That's just the nature of water in Sherborn. Some luck to it. So that's where I come out, and maybe we disagree. Okay, I do not think that we need to make a final decision on this, and unless the board members really want to push it to that at this point, we would be a 2-to-1 vote if things sort of broke with the straw poll. My sense is, and board members, I'm looking at you guys and I'm thinking about this, that we ought to all continue to think about it. I hope that the various parties listening will sort of hear where we're leaning, but I'm not planning to push the board to make a formal vote tonight unless somebody on the call says there's a really good reason why we have to.
Well, Rick, I have one question about your stated position.
Yeah, go ahead. You can have two.
Okay. You seem to be basing your opinion on possible speculative scenarios about one well or the other going dry, as opposed to a public system having more resiliency and avoiding that possibility. I think we have to look at what is there now, and is a private water supply inherently not safe? It's inherently present health risks?
Well,
like
so. Most litigators, you've put the rabbit in the hat and then pulled it out by calling my concern speculative, which I don't think it necessarily is speculative. One could say it's speculative that all the private ones are going to work perfectly for the life cycle of this unit. I don't think either one of us knows. I'm certainly not enough of a groundwater expert. But simply, I'm used to things going wrong. And if you can have a backup that's right there to be connected, that's always a good thing. Again, you don't have to agree with me, but that's Mike Nels,
yes.
You're not a board member, but
no.
Please.
We're up on 68 Farm Road. I also actually live at 11 Leland. My mother's up at 68 Farm Road, but yeah, I can attest to bad wells and just at Leland Farms. And I'm just curious, has anybody done a study based on ice melt, winter ice melt, lawn chemicals, things like that affecting wells, especially with a proposed development this size? I could basically pretty much, I've been a board member at Leland Farms before, and I can tell you that probably most likely the ice melt that's running from Woodhaven from the parking lot directly basically into that well that's been drilled for Leland Farms probably caused a lot of the problems that's currently been going on there. I know it's had to be refracked, and we had to tap into Woodhaven's water and had water deliveries and all sorts of things. So, and it's to the tunes of many tens of thousands of dollars in repairs and all sorts of things like that. But also basically the concern with other chemicals and things like that affecting water and wells, and especially thinking about Farm Road and what might happen there.
Okay. Deshaun Wang.
Yes, I'm just it's very important to have a thorough discussion, and I appreciated the chairman's concern about the liability of the private wells because it's single. But don't forget, the wells, we say withdraw one, but with the private well setting, there's much more flexibility to drill more wells if we find one doesn't work based on what you said. And as far as I know right now, there are 2 private wells on the side. I want to put in the context of the water demand perspective, because so each of the well is basically serving about 10 or 11 bedrooms. It's just like a big house, like a single family house, big house, okay? It's not like you are thinking of, you are serving 50, homes. So it's only like a few, 2 or 3, 5 at most units, 2 bedrooms. So given that, and as Mr. Finch just mentioned, I'm saying I would like to look in the similar wells in that area. At least that I know the yield for 53 and 55 Farm Road. 55 is pretty much sit on top of the hill, and 53 is at the bottom of the hill. And the yield of the 2 wells, believe it or not, they almost no difference. One is 10 and one 11 gallon per minute. And to put in a yield requirement for all individual wells to meet this 10 bedroom needs, you only need about 2 or 3 gallons per minute. Okay, it's not like you will bring tremendous flow with the 350 gallon boost tank. So I want to put in that picture. So it's just for a quick thought of a foot of thought. When you evaluating, everybody want to looking into and concern and hold to evaluate the water quality and quantity perspective. So we are, without that, things will become like a more speculative rather than scientific based from the geology perspective and from the data we know, and to say down the road, how can we make sure each of the well can be put in a safer and reliable, and what kind of makeups down the road they have an option. Just like each individual home, I have worked on dozens of I see people running low in wells, and then they have to move another 20, 30 feet, and they get a good yield. So it is, those are the ones is not much difference in the way to coming up a plan. So it's not like, say, after we drill one well, if it doesn't work it and you have no room at all to move the private well, but for public well, the 4 wells are separated by 50 feet, just assume they still have a chance. All the 4 wells can fail to produce the yield we needed. And then at that time, if we have to drill another well under the public wells requirement setbacks, it will be much harder actually to find a well may work. So you can see there's a lot of complications into it, but I don't really see the private setting will typically yield like a weak point in the reliability or safety perspective. That's just my point.
Right, and the example you raise is a good one, but the science of human nature proves my point. I mean, I've spent my entire life in the real estate world and dealing with condominium associations, and when you've got a 50-unit condominium and there's a problem for only 5 of them, guess how the other 45 vote? They say, I'm not going to fix it. It's not my problem. And that's what's going to happen here.
I was not, if I understand right, say if we have like 5 units, those 5 units, they have no choice. They have to fix it. So just like if you have your own house, if your well doesn't work, you vote not to fix it, you will have to fix it. But less people.
But they're not going to own the land. The condominium will own the land.
Well, that's.
You need to have the whole association agree to do that.
Of course, I think that the
And they're not
condominium
going to.
must
That's my point.
can come in up the degree for essential needs. If like one will write down, and they will have to providing that right to, because it's not just providing to one, because the fail to all the 7 wells could be any of them. So it means that we can put in a condition, any of them, they have the right. I mean, should be guaranteed to drill another well to provide their needs. That's easy.
Yeah.
I'm not an attorney, but I can see common sense.
Right.
That would be put in.
Right, but the common sense is sometimes pretty dark. And the great news about condominiums is they're a democracy. And the horrible news about condominiums, and everyone who's ever lived in one knows, it's a democracy.
That's why you should have the constitution, right?
And sometimes people don't want to do what they should do.
The master agreement under the condo have to be given that condition. I'm sure Bob can make that happen before even that document is just like constitution. If the constitution is bad, then it will be a bad democracy, because the bad democracy is the worst dictatorship. We all know that.
Right, but I think we will, again, if we go with private, the problem with giving the condominium association control over the wells is that's a no under DEP. You have to be owning your own well, and everyone has to sit on their own bottom, as we say in boating. So I think we do have a problem here with what happens if the well supporting units 1, 2, 3, and 4 goes out. Because in a public water supply, you just draw on the others, but in a private, units 1, 2, 3, and 4 may have a real problem that they cannot solve easily on their own.
The town was okay with it, Rick, at Abbey Road.
Okay. And that was 18 units. And it hasn't always worked out perfectly.
From an ownership of the well perspective, it's worked out just fine. Sarah has talked.
All right. I hear,
you're talking about forcing us to be something that the state has said we're not.
Excuse me. That would, if you're going to put in front of this board a definitive final ruling by DEP that this is approved, subject to no conditions, and is extremely safe as a private, that's fine. But what I heard and what I read was that it was highly preliminary.
No,
subject to a lot of conditions.
I disagree with that respectfully.
Okay. Well, fair enough, and you're entitled to do so, and as is Paul. Daryl.
I just want to mention that the Board of Health would have preferred, at the time, the board makeup at that time would have preferred that Abbey Road was also a public water supply. But again, the way that it was laid out, it went through their evaluation, and they acknowledged that the way it was set up, because of some of the allowances they have, was not required to be a public water supply.
Okay, fair enough. And I think what we can all agree on as it closes in on 8:58 is we don't have closure on this issue tonight. A lot of good discussion, a lot of thoughtful views, lots of room for more people to weigh in if they have specific engineering or legal reasons why it has to be one way or the other. I'm sure the board would be glad to hear them. I don't think we're going to have any time to get to septic system design and nitrate loading. I know, Bob, you had written to me that you're not, you don't have your final stormwater design in any way. So let's talk about what extension could work. I was thinking 45 days from now, which would give us a chance to have a hearing out 30 days, but then also have a little fallback room in case at the end of that hearing we were at loggerheads. I always hate to have the extension run out the day before the next hearing, because if we do wind up at loggerheads at the next hearing, I want to have a couple of days to have a short hearing so we can, get the final information in. I propose that we extend this to Monday, the 5th, to run in cycle with the other one, if that's okay with the development team. But we will need an extension. Are you still willing to go to March 1st, Bob, or do you want to propose a different date?
Yeah, what I had suggested in my email to you just before the meeting, Rick, as you know, was
Right.
that we extend to March 1st and that you schedule a meeting for, now you have for obviously February 5th. Thank you. And I was suggesting that you do one more meeting before March 1st. And I anticipate that you will have everything you need to make a thoughtful decision and close the hearing by that time. If you disagree, let me know. I want to work with you, Rick.
Yeah, no, it was a very constructive and thoughtful approach. Does the 25th fall in school vacation week, which is not an issue for me, but
No,
is
it's
an issue for
after,
some?
actually. It's after.
It's after,
a
okay.
week after school
That's a good
vacation.
choice.
Yeah, and by the way, it doesn't have to be the 26th. Anytime that week is fine.
Okay. Marion, quickly.
Very quickly, the last site plan that we see on the town website is September of 2023. And you've promised a new site plan. You didn't want to give us too many, but we haven't had any updated site plans that I can find on the town website. So I'm just requesting that we see an updated site plan.
Yeah, so Marion,
rather than later.
We get a lot of complaints when there are too many versions of the site plan. And so given the fact we worked with the peer reviewer and with Mark over at the Board of Health, they requested some additional testing. We did that within, I don't know, a week of when they, when everybody sat down and they requested it. We got that testing done on January 3rd. We just are getting the test results back. We didn't feel like it made any sense to put out a site plan when we got this testing, and it might change the stormwater picture a little bit. Obviously, we're taking a look at the flooding that occurred as we discussed at the beginning of this meeting. It's possible that things will need to change there. I mean, if you want us to give you a new site plan every 10 days, we can do that. I don't think that's a healthy thing.
No, I'm not asking for one every 10 days. I'm asking for just a updated site plan because the last one we saw is September. That's months.
One thing I could point you to, Marion, is that while we didn't do a comprehensive permit new site plan, the site plan that we submitted for the Title V included a number of updates, which you will see in the next site plan. So if you want to go to the town website and look at the Title V site plan, you'll see a lot of the updates. For example, changes in the solar location and various other things. But we just didn't want to overwhelm the board with too many versions.
And that is posted on the website?
I believe it is. Jeannie can tell us, but I believe it is.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, I see several hands up. I actually want to hear from board members about whether the 26th, which is a Monday, could work as a second scheduled hearing date. Jonathan, Todd, Zach.
26.
Zach disappeared somewhere.
Yes.
That's fine for me.
Okay. Todd?
Yes, I can make that work.
All right. So I think we'd have a deal then, that we'd extend to March 1st and schedule 2 dates, Monday the 5th and Monday the 26th. And I'll make a motion to that effect after we have a little more discussion. We'll hopefully be able to wrap up everything then. Okay, Rebecca Honeywell.
Is the discussion ended? Because I have a question and I won't bring it up if the discussion has ended for tonight.
Discussion, it's 9:03. We're trying to shut things off.
Yeah.
What can you articulate quickly?
So my question is the flooding. I think maybe at the next meeting, maybe we should ask some of the, wasn't there a scientist or a specialist, somebody, I don't know whether it was hired by the town or hired by the abutter, who said that that there were some risks of flooding because of the geologic characteristics of the region. And how does that relate? And then separately, part B of the question is, how does the flooding that we're seeing now relate to the swale or the whatever was in, there was something in the road that was removed by the town because there was there had been put into place years ago, something to influence the way water moved during storms. And I was wondering if there's any relationship to that being removed and this flooding that we're looking at now.
Right, so that's a live issue. The development team has said, yep, we see the flooding, we see the ice. We're gonna sit down with our drainage and design people, come up with a plan. We're gonna run it past Tetra Tech, the town's peer reviewer, and that will all be teed up for all of us to look at carefully.
Rick, can I just add one more piece of information that I think is relevant?
Please.
Which is that we were contacted by the town and we went and sat down with it around this issue that Rebecca just raised of the town having an illicit drain onto our property, illicit pipe onto our property. The town called us, we went and sat down with them and with the peer reviewer, Steve, and DeShang, and we had some really good conversations about how we might work together to resolve what the town sees as a really concerning issue of all the water coming down primarily from the hillside, the south side of Farm Road. And we all know the story of water being pumped out of the basement continuously and all of that. Anyway, we are in good conversations to work collaboratively with the town to help, frankly, them resolve this issue, which we also think needs to be resolved. We agree.
All right, awesome, thank you. Michael Lesser, very, very quickly, and something I hope is new.
Yes, hi, Michael Lesser, 54 Forest Street, speaking for the Conservation Commission. I just want to make sure that at some point the Conservation Commission comments are addressed, and which could include some peer review issues around a vegetation plan that's been questions for the area that's in the buffer zone of the pond there that only falls under the town bylaw. So I just want to make sure with all the big issues there that the comments there are not overlooked.
Don't get lost in the
And
shuffle.
addressed.
Yep. Okay, fair enough. Thank you. It's 9:06. We're 6 minutes over. Brian Moore, something really new and very brief.
It is very brief. Thank you, Mr. Chair. My comments are basically focused on our observations over the last couple of weeks, which are that the physical limitations of this property, because of the simple, as Bob called it, citizen science of physics and chemistry, really can't support a project of this size. And there's a lot of information in our letters and submittals that support that. And I encourage all board members and people who are interested in this to please log into the Sherborn Land Development webpage and review those documents. Thank you.
Fair enough. Thank you. And I agree that everybody should read all those materials and they can weigh them all for themselves. That's the way the good side of democracy works. All right. If there are no further comments, I'm going to move, board members, a combination motion that we continue this hearing until Monday night, February 5th at 7 p.m., that we further schedule another hearing for Monday, February 26th at 7 p.m., and that immediately after this vote, if it passes, we adjourn. That's my motion.
I second.
Any further discussion? Daryl, we're in the middle of a motion. Better be earth-shattering.
Just didn't want to forget to ask whether the other boards can close their meetings.
Oh, that's
before
a
you do.
very smart question. I beg your pardon. Yes. As a discussion point during our vote, would the rest of you like to close your meetings?
Yes, you want us to do it first?
All right.
Go ahead, Daryl.
Okay. So I'd like to make a motion that the Board of Health adjourn its meeting.
So moved.
Seconded. Any further discussion? Daryl Beardsley, aye.
Julie Dreyfus, aye.
Diana Hook, aye.
Rebecca Honeywell, aye.
Thank you.
Thank you all for your time and attention.
Same for the select board. I have a motion to adjourn the select board.
So moved.
In a second.
So a second.
And Eric?
Aye.
Roll call vote. Stephen?
Aye.
Marion?
Aye.
And I am as well. Thank thanks to the whole team, Bob's team
All right,
and
all
the
right.
town team. This was a great meeting.
Thank you, Select Board. All right, I'll now renew the discussion. Any further comments, procedural or otherwise, on the motion on the table for Monday the 5th, Monday the 26th, and then to adjourn? I don't see any hands for once. All right, that's my motion. It's been moved and seconded. All in favor, aye. Have to do it by roll call. Novak votes aye.
Mitch, aye.
Labby, aye.
Fried eye.
All right, everybody, thank you very much for a very, very, very helpful session. Have a great evening.